A lost city is never truly gone, only waiting. Across our planet, ancient streets and silent towers keep pushing back into the light, not by chance, but because the Earth itself is telling a story. This is a global mystery where shifting sands, consuming jungles, and melting ice are not just hiding places but active characters in an epic of disappearance and return. By the end of this journey, you will understand the hidden forces that preserve and reveal our past, connecting dots from the Sahara to the Amazon to the thawing Alps. Why do these sites choose such extreme places to endure, and what does their sudden reappearance tell us about our own world? The answer lies in a powerful dance between human ambition and a planet that never forgets. What do you think it means for a civilization to leave a mark that even time cannot fully erase? These are not the cities of pure legend, whispered about in myths and never found. That distinction is crucial. When we speak of a buried city, we are not chasing ghosts like Atlantis, a story born from philosophy and metaphor. We are talking about something wonderfully, tangibly real. A buried city, for our purpose, is a once-living community whose physical skeleton, its streets, walls, and foundations, was not so much destroyed as it was put into a deep, natural sleep. The key agents here are not invading armies or deliberate demolition, though those forces exist in history. Instead, the primary caretakers are the environment itself. Think of a city not being erased but being carefully wrapped and stored by the planet. A sudden, catastrophic blanket of volcanic ash, like in Pompeii, is one dramatic example. But more often, the process is slower, more patient. It is the relentless advance of desert sands, grain by grain, building a protective dune over mud brick walls. It is the slow creep of jungle soil and roots, encasing stone temples in a living green vault. It is the steady accumulation of glacial ice, sealing a high mountain pass and everything on it in a frozen time capsule. These natural processes do two remarkable things. First, they conceal. They hide the city from sight, often for centuries or millennia, shielding it from the weathering of wind and rain and from later human interference. But second, and just as importantly, they preserve. The sand prevents erosion. The peat bog creates an airless environment that stops wood from rotting. The ice freeze dries organic material. The city is not gone, it is in stasis. So our focus narrows to those places where the Earth itself became the guardian of a lost chapter, and where a change in that same environment, a shift in the wind, a retreating glacier, a cleared patch of forest, becomes the moment the guardian opens the vault and says, "Look what I have kept for you." This sets aside cities that were simply abandoned and crumbled, or those directly flattened by conflict and then built over. Their story is different. Our story is about a partnership, however unintended, between human creation and planetary preservation. A hidden collaboration that makes the sudden reappearance of a street, a tool, or a temple not just a discovery, but a reunion. This pattern of preservation paints a map of discovery that spans the entire globe. From the scorching dunes of Egypt's lost cities emerging from the Sahara's edge, to the sandstone temples of Petra in Jordan, revealed after centuries hidden in desert canyons, the arid zones have long been generous keepers of the past. But shift the landscape to the opposite extreme, to the dense, humid jungles of Cambodia. Here, the magnificent stone complex of Angkor Wat was not so much buried as it was consumed, enveloped by a fast-growing tropical forest that both concealed and protected its grand towers from wider recognition for generations. Across the ocean, in the rainforests of Guatemala, the story repeats with the Maya metropolis of Tikal, its limestone pyramids once shrouded in a green sea of vegetation. Now turn your gaze to the cold, high places of the world. In the European Alps, as perennial ice patches retreat, artifacts from ancient travelers emerge from their frozen graves, leather shoes and tools left on mountain passes millennia ago. In the Andes of South America, melting glaciers are yielding pristine Inca ceremonial sites, with artifacts so well preserved they seem only decades old, not centuries. This is the critical insight. It is not a series of isolated, lucky finds. It is a worldwide phenomenon, a consistent rule written in the language of geology and climate. The specific guardian changes sand, jungle, or ice, but the underlying principle remains. Extreme environments, often seen as hostile to human life, possess a unique power to first swallow and then safeguard the physical evidence of our history. They create the perfect conditions for a time capsule, whether through dryness, lack of oxygen, or constant freezing. So when we hear of a new city found in a desert or an artifact melting out of a glacier, we are not witnessing a random accident. We are seeing a predictable planetary pattern of revelation, where shifts in the very climate that once hid these places are now, quietly and persistently, handing them back. The most silent and patient of these guardians is the desert. It operates on a scale of time that feels almost geological, where a century can pass between one grain of sand settling and the next. Yet within this vast, arid stillness lies a perfect recipe for preservation. The fundamental condition is a profound and relentless dryness. Water is the great engine of decay. It rots wood, rusts metal, and dissolves mortar. Remove it, and the clock of deterioration slows to a crawl. In the hyper-arid heart of a desert microbial activity, the tiny life that breaks down organic material grinds nearly to a halt. A piece of leather, a wooden tool, or a textile that would vanish in a decade in a temperate forest can lie undisturbed for millennia, simply waiting in the dry air. Then there is the sand itself, a dynamic, shifting blanket. A desert does not simply sit still, it breathes. Winds sculpt dunes that can march across the landscape, and in their path they can perform two opposite but equally crucial functions. First, they bury. A city on the edge of a dune field may be gradually engulfed, not by a sudden cataclysm, but by a slow, gentle submersion. The sand fills streets and courtyards, piles against walls, and eventually roofs entire structures. This creates a protective cocoon, shielding fragile mud, brick, or stone from the very wind that delivered the sand, and from the rare but violent scouring of desert storms. The city is entombed in a stable, dry, and dark environment, but the story does not end there, for the wind is a fickle custodian. Centuries later, prevailing patterns may shift. A new dance of the dunes begins, and the same erosive force that once buried the city can now uncover it. Wind scours the surface, peeling back layers of sand to reveal a corner of a wall, the curve of a pottery shard, a silent signal that something vast sleeps just beneath. This is how lost cities announce their presence, not with a fanfare, but with a whisper carried on the dry wind, a single exposed stone in an ocean of sand that says, "Look deeper." The desert does not destroy, it simply chooses when to remember. This gentle burial by sand is a masterpiece of preservation. Unlike a violent mudslide or the crushing weight of volcanic rock, wind-driven sand accumulates with a patient, almost tender consistency. It does not smash structures, it envelops them. Picture a building not being hit by a solid wall, but being slowly submerged in a rising tide of fine, dry particles. Each grain is minuscule, and as the wind deposits layer upon layer, the pressure builds so gradually that even fragile mud brick walls can withstand it, held in place by the very material that covers them. The result is a perfect, sterile vault. Oxygen, the partner of decay, cannot penetrate deeply. Moisture is absent. insects and microorganisms that would feast on wood, cloth, or leather find no foothold in this arid tomb. This is why discoveries in desert sands can be so astonishingly intimate. Archaeologists have uncovered loaves of bread, left in ovens for millennia, still recognizable in form. They have found colorful textiles, their dyes still vibrant, and wooden tools that look as if they were dropped yesterday. The sand did not just hide these objects, it suspended them in time, creating a snapshot of daily life frozen at the moment of abandonment. Compare this to other forms of rapid burial. A volcanic eruption like the one that covered Pompeii creates a different kind of time capsule, one formed by sudden, searing heat and then a heavy, concrete-like layer of ash. It preserves silhouettes and voids with heartbreaking immediacy, but often consumes the organic material entirely. A catastrophic mudslide exerts immense, crushing pressure, flattening and mangling structures. The sands method is different. It is less about a single, catastrophic moment and more about a slow, inevitable transformation of the landscape, a process that protects rather than pulverizes. This delicate balance between concealing and preserving is the desert's unique gift, offering us not just stones and foundations, but the breath of the people who once lived there, captured in the ordinary things they left behind. But this wind is a two-faced custodian, both creator and revealer of these sandy tombs. The same relentless force that spent centuries piling protective dunes over a city can, with a simple shift in pattern or a rare, powerful storm, become the architect of its revelation. This process is called aeolian erosion, named for Aeolus, the Greek keeper of the winds, and it operates with a patient, sculpting power. Imagine a dune field not as a static landscape, but as a slow-moving ocean of sand. Prevailing winds push these dunes in a consistent direction over decades, but climate patterns change, seasonal winds shift, and over centuries, the entire dance of the desert floor can reorganize itself. A dune that once sheltered a city's western wall might gradually migrate eastward, grain by grain, pulled by a new wind current. As it moves, it begins to pull the sand blanket away from the structures it once covered. This is not a violent stripping, but a gradual unveiling, like a curtain being drawn back by an invisible hand. More dramatically, a fierce, multi-day desert storm can act as a natural sandblaster. Hurricane-force winds lift millions of sand particles, creating an abrasive cloud that scours the surface. In a matter of hours or days, such a storm can erase feet of accumulated sand, cutting down to a level untouched for 1,000 years. This is how a city announces its return. One season, there is only a smooth, unbroken slope of sand. The next, after a great storm has passed, the tips of stone walls or the geometric outline of a foundation might emerge stark and unexpected against the golden dunes. Across the Sahara and the Arabian Peninsula, this cycle of burial and exposure is a constant, slow-motion drama. An entire street layout can be revealed by the retreat of a single, massive dune, or a lone watchtower might appear, its upper half suddenly free, standing sentinel over a desert that has finally decided to share its secret. The wind does not care for our timelines, it works on a planetary schedule, and when it chooses to exhale, it can uncover in a season what it took a millennium to hide. While the desert's wind reveals what it once hid, sometimes a city is lost not to sand but to memory. The rose-red city of Petra, carved directly into the sandstone cliffs of southern Jordan, stands as a powerful testament to this different kind of disappearance. Here, the Guardian was not a drifting dune, but a profound shift in the world's economic heartbeat. For centuries, the Nabataeans, a resourceful desert people, mastered the arid landscape, controlling the lucrative trade routes for incense, spices, and silk that connected the great empires of the East and West. Petra, with its ingenious water management systems and monumental tombs facades like the iconic treasury, was the dazzling heart of this network, a city born from commerce and carved from living rock. It was never buried in the conventional sense. Its grand facades remained exposed to the sun and wind. Its vanishing was more subtle and more complete. As maritime trade routes expanded under the Roman Empire, the slow, camel-borne caravans across the desert became less central to global commerce. The lifeblood that sustained Petra gradually dwindled. Major earthquakes in the 4th and 7th centuries damaged its vital water channels and structures, dealing a final blow to an already fading city. Slowly, Petra emptied, its grand buildings repurposed by later inhabitants and then largely abandoned, becoming a silent, majestic ruin known only to the local Bedouin tribes. For the wider world, it faded into legend, a place mentioned in ancient texts but whose location was effectively lost to Western knowledge. This is where the idea of rediscovery takes on a deeper meaning. Petra was never truly gone. It was held in the careful custody of local knowledge, its existence and location a continuous part of Bedouin heritage for generations. The moment celebrated as its rediscovery in 1812, when Swiss explorer Johann Ludwig Burckhardt, disguised and guided by local people, was led to the hidden Sick Canyon and the breathtaking facade beyond, was not an act of unearthing. It was an act of reintroduction, a reconnection of a local secret with a global audience. The city did not need to be dug up, it needed to be remembered by the world that had forgotten it. This reminds us that a lost city can be physically present yet culturally invisible, and that its return to our shared story is often less about excavation and more about the bridging of separate streams of knowledge, a moment when a guarded local truth becomes a wonder for all humanity. The story of the Desert Guardian takes an even more profound turn when we look beyond legendary Petra to cities that vanished completely beneath the waves of sand. Deep within the Libyan Sahara, the empire of the Garamontes flourished for over 1,000 years, not as simple nomads but as masters of a hostile world. Their secret was a web of underground tunnels called fagaras that tapped into ancient fossil water reserves deep beneath the desert floor. This ingenious irrigation system transformed arid valleys into green agricultural heartlands, supporting a network of towns, fortresses, and trade routes. Yet when the climate shifted and the precious water sources finally dwindled, their civilization faded. The relentless desert, which they had held at bay for centuries, moved in. Dunes advanced, filling their canals and burying their mud-brick settlements until not a single wall remained visible. The cities were not just abandoned, they were utterly erased from the surface, leaving only whispers in historical texts. For generations, their very existence was a question mark on the map. This same narrative echoes in the Taklamakan Desert of China, where the Silk Road once pulsed with life. Oasis towns that thrived on trade were gradually strangled by shifting dunes and changing river courses, their wooden structures and Buddhist temples swallowed whole by the sand, preserved in the dry darkness but lost to human memory. For centuries, finding these places was a matter of dangerous guesswork and sheer luck. But today, technology has given us new eyes. Satellite imagery, scanning the Earth from orbit, can detect subtle variations in vegetation or soil moisture that hint at buried walls or ancient riverbeds. Even more powerful is ground-penetrating radar, which sends pulses of energy into the Earth and maps the echoes that bounce back from hidden structures. From the sky and through the sand, we are now drawing the blueprints of these lost worlds. We can trace the ghostly lines of Garamontes irrigation channels running for miles beneath the dunes, mapping a hydrological skeleton of an empire. We can pinpoint the outlines of buried foundations in the Taklamakan, guiding precise excavations. This technological leap transforms discovery from a treasure hunt into a conversation. We are no longer just scratching at the surface hoping to find something. We are listening to the desert's subsurface, asking it to reveal the intricate networks it has safeguarded for a millennium. The sand still holds the cities, but now we can finally see their shapes in the dark. The desert's guardianship is one of stillness, a dry and silent preservation. But there is another keeper, one that operates through a relentless, living force. Leave the open sands and step beneath the canopy of a tropical jungle. Here, the air itself feels thick with time, humid and heavy with the scent of earth and growth. This is a world of profound contradiction for any lost city. The jungle is not a patient blanket. It is a consuming entity, a place of breathtaking creation and constant, efficient decay. To understand how a city disappears here, you must understand the central paradox of the rainforest. It is an environment that both destroys and camouflages with equal, terrifying vigor. On one hand, its biology is an unstoppable dismantling crew. Warmth and constant moisture create the perfect conditions for fungi, insects, and microorganisms to thrive. A wooden post left exposed will be reduced to soft, spongy pulp in a matter of years. Stone is not immune, as acidic rainwater and relentless roots seek out every microscopic crack, patiently prying apart the strongest masonry over centuries. This is a world that actively digests the works of humanity. Yet, in the very same breath, the jungle is a master of concealment. Where the desert reveals through subtraction, the jungle hides through explosive addition. Fast-growing vegetation, from thick, sinewy lianas to towering hardwoods, does not merely grow around ruins, it grows through them. Roots snake into mortar joints, slowly transforming walls into trellises. Canopies close overhead, blotting out the sky and casting the forest floor into a perpetual green twilight. Within a generation of abandonment, a stone temple can become an indistinguishable part of the hillside, a mound of earth and greenery. This makes discovery here a battle not against geology, but against biology itself. An archaeologist in the desert scans for straight lines against the curves of dunes. In the jungle, they must learn to see the straight lines beneath the chaos, to distinguish a man-made terrace from a natural slope, to hear the hollow sound of a stone slab beneath a meter of leaf litter and root mat. The city is not buried, it is assimilated, becoming one with the very force that seeks to erase it. The jungle does not bury a city, it wears it. Stone by stone, the forest transforms human ambition into a part of its own anatomy. This process begins with the most delicate of invasions. A tiny seed carried by wind or bird finds a foothold in a crack between two perfectly fitted stones. It germinates, sending a hair-thin root into the accumulated dust and moisture within that joint. With each passing year, that root thickens, exerting a gentle, inexorable pressure. It is a force measured in grams at first, but over decades it becomes a slow, silent lever, prying the masonry apart from within. This is not a violent act, but a patient one. Vines follow, their tendrils lashing around columns and cascading over walls, pulling stonework into a living embrace. The forest floor itself rises, as centuries of fallen leaves and decaying matter build up a new layer of earth, slowly submerging the lower courses of walls and stairways. The structure is not demolished, it is dismantled and reclaimed, its stones becoming the foundation for an entirely new ecosystem. A temple gateway becomes the anchoring point for a giant fig tree, its roots flowing over the carved lintel like liquid stone. What was once a grand plaza becomes a sun-dappled grove, the original floor now several feet beneath a soft carpet of humus and roots. The city is physically dismantled, yet its bones are held in place, providing the skeleton for a new green body. This creates a camouflage so effective it defies human perception from the ground. You could literally be standing on a buried staircase, surrounded by the moss-covered ruins of a palace wall, and see nothing but a tangled hillside. The uniformity of the canopy is the final shroud. From within the forest, every direction looks the same, a repeating pattern of tree trunks, hanging vines, and shadow. There are no long sight lines, no vistas that reveal the geometry of human planning. a sprawling city of tens of thousands becomes a collection of isolated, green-shrouded mounds, invisible to anyone walking between them. For centuries, this was the ultimate barrier to discovery. Explorers would hear local legends of a great stone city in the forest, but push through the dense undergrowth only to find more forest. The city was not lost in space, it was lost in plain sight, hidden behind a living veil that perfectly mimicked the wilderness around it. To find it, you would need a viewpoint that the jungle itself could not provide, a way to see the forest not as a participant within it, but as a shape laid out upon the land. The jungle's victory is never a sudden conquest, but the final act of a long and quiet retreat. For a great city to be so completely enveloped, the hands that once held it back must first let go. This moment of abandonment is the true turning point, the instant the balance of power shifts irrevocably from human order to natural reclamation. Why would a thriving metropolis in the heart of the rainforest ever be left to the vines and roots? The reasons are as complex as the societies themselves, but they often trace back to a profound instability in the very systems that made the city possible in the first place. In many cases, archaeological evidence points to periods of extended regional drought. A civilization like the classic Maya, for instance, built astonishing urban centers in a landscape where water was a precious seasonal resource. Their survival depended on intricate networks of reservoirs and canals, and on consistent rainfall patterns. When those patterns shifted over decades, when droughts became more frequent and severe, the pressure on this hydrological lifeline became immense. Crop yields would fall, reservoirs would dip to critical levels, and the social contract that bound people to their rulers, who were seen as intermediaries with the rain gods, would begin to fray. Political upheaval often followed, as competing factions vied for control over dwindling resources. In this atmosphere of strain, the monumental maintenance required to keep the jungle at bay, the constant clearing of plazas and repair of temple facades, would become an unsustainable burden. The decision to leave might not have been a single dramatic exodus, but a gradual dispersal. Families, one by one, might have moved to more reliable water sources or to smaller, sustainable settlements, until one day, the last caretaker walked away from the grand central plaza. With that final departure, the clock started. The jungle, which had been held in check at the edges of fields and the bases of walls for centuries, sensed the opening. Within a single growing season, pioneer plants would take root in the cracks of the grand staircase. Within a few years, saplings would rise in the middle of what was once a bustling marketplace. The forest did not march in as an invading army. It simply flowed back into the space that had always been its own, filling the vacuum with breathtaking speed. The city was not buried by an external force, but consumed from within the moment its own life force. Its people and their constant labor ceased to flow. The regrowing forest became the primary burial agent, not by dropping soil from above, but by weaving a new reality directly through the stones of the old one, stitching the human past back into the fabric of the living earth. The story of Angkor is the ultimate testament to the jungle's power to hide a civilization in plain sight. For centuries, local communities in Cambodia knew of the magnificent stone temple of Angkor Wat, a place of spiritual significance and wonder. But to the wider world, it was a rumor, a lost city swallowed by the green vastness. When French naturalist Henry Mauhat reached the site in the 1860s, he was not discovering an empty ruin, he was witnessing a breathtaking and unequal struggle. He described temples of astonishing scale and artistry, but they were not standing free in a clearing. They were locked in a silent, monumental embrace with the forest. Giant fig and silk cotton trees had grown directly from the rooftops and courtyards, their roots cascading over carved stone walls like great stone waterfalls made of living wood. The roots did not crush the temples so much as they incorporated them, weaving the human architecture into their own biological structure. To Mauhot and the explorers who followed, these were isolated, spectacular monuments, jungle cathedrals standing alone in the wilderness. They could not see the city because the city was invisible, buried not under soil but under an unbroken ocean of trees. For over a century, this was the accepted view. Angkor was a ceremonial center surrounded by a modest support village. The truth, as we now know, was far grander and more profound. The key to seeing it finally came not from the ground but from the sky through a technology called LiDAR. This system works by flying a plane or drone over the forest and firing millions of laser pulses downward. Most light bounces off the thick canopy, but a fraction penetrates through gaps in the leaves and hits the solid ground below. By measuring the time it takes for each pulse to return, scientists can strip away the vegetation digitally, creating a breathtakingly detailed three-dimensional map of the actual ground surface. When researchers first used LiDAR over the forests around Angkor Wat, the map that emerged was nothing short of revolutionary. The scattered temples were not isolated at all. They were the stone peaks of a vast, submerged metropolis. The lasers revealed the ghostly grid of an ancient urban sprawl, a meticulously planned landscape hidden for centuries. They traced the outlines of thousands of vanished houses, ponds, and community temples, all made of wood and earth that had long since decayed. They mapped a colossal network of roads, canals, and reservoirs that once managed water across an area the size of a modern metropolis. The great temples were merely the most durable parts of a living, breathing city that supported perhaps 1 million people at its height, making it one of the largest pre-industrial urban centers on Earth. This one technological leap rewrote history, transforming our understanding from a collection of beautiful ruins to a complete, complex civilization that had been lying in wait beneath a living green blanket. The jungle had not just hidden the stones, it had hidden the very shape of a society. The story of Angkor reveals a city hidden beneath a canopy, but in the Americas, the jungle performed an even more complete vanishing act. For the classic Maya, whose civilization reached its peak between the years 250 and 900, the forest was not just a surrounding, it was the very fabric of their world. Their great cities like Tikal in Guatemala or Caracol in Belize were not clearings in the wilderness but intricate parts of it. They built their limestone pyramids to scrape the sky, their broad plazas for ceremony and commerce, all within a living, breathing rainforest. And then, over a relatively short period, these vibrant centers grew quiet. By the time Spanish explorers arrived centuries later, they found only small communities living near incomprehensible, green-shrouded hills. The great cities had not been destroyed, they had been returned. The process of their disappearance is a masterclass in environmental reclamation. When a Maya city was actively maintained, thousands of hands worked constantly to manage the jungle. They cleared vegetation from plazas, repaired the stucco facades of temples, and maintained the agricultural fields that fed the population. But when that maintenance stopped, the forest responded with breathtaking speed. Within a few years, fast-growing pioneer trees and thick vines would colonize every open space. Within decades, the roots of fig trees would find the mortar between the grand staircase blocks, beginning their patient, centuries-long work of prying the architecture apart. The most striking transformation, however, was visual. A 90-foot-tall temple pyramid over generations would become an earthen mound. Wind-blown soil and decaying leaf litter would accumulate on its steps and terraces. Seeds would take root, and the stone core would become a stable foundation for a new, forested hill. To the eyes of later farmers or settlers, these were not the works of a lost civilization. They were simply part of the natural topography, convenient high ground in a flat landscape. This perfect camouflage meant that even when early archaeologists arrived, they often struggled to distinguish a man-made structure from a natural feature without excavation. The city did not sink into the earth rose up to claim it, dressing stone in soil and trees until it became indistinguishable from the hills around it. This envelopment was so total that it preserved the cities in a state of suspended animation, waiting for the right moment to be recognized again. The trigger for this great abandonment remains one of history's most compelling puzzles. While no single cause provides a simple answer, a powerful convergence of evidence points to climate as a primary stressor. Analysis of sediment cores from regional lakes reveals a series of intense, multi-decade droughts that struck the Maya lowlands precisely during the 9th and 10th centuries, the very time when city after city fell silent. For a society deeply reliant on seasonal rainfall for their reservoir-based water supply and agriculture, these prolonged dry periods would have been catastrophic. Crop failures would have led to food shortages, undermining public health and straining social order. The ruling elite, whose authority was tied to their perceived ability to commune with the gods of rain and fertility, would have faced a crisis of legitimacy. In this atmosphere of scarcity and doubt, the social contract that bound thousands of people to the urban center would have frayed. The monumental effort required to maintain the city against the jungle may have simply become untenable. The decision to leave likely began as a gradual dispersal, a strategic retreat to smaller, more sustainable settlements near reliable water sources. Over a generation or two, the population dwindled until the last families departed. They did not vanish, they adapted and moved on, their descendants living in the region to this day. The abandonment was not an end but a transformation, and it left the stage empty for the forest's final, magnificent act of reclamation, wrapping the stone bones of a civilization in a deep green silence. But there is a third guardian, one whose work is defined not by dryness or growth but by absolute cold. Leave the heat of the desert and the humidity of the jungle behind, and ascend into the world of ice. Here, in the high mountain passes and the frozen northern plains, time operates under a different law. Glaciers and permafrost, ground that remains frozen for at least 2 consecutive years, are not passive landscapes. They are dynamic, living archives. Their method of preservation is the most dramatic of all. They do not just slow decay, they stop it almost entirely. In the deep freeze of a glacier or the stable chill of permafrost, organic material enters a state of suspended animation. Bacteria cannot function, chemical reactions grind to a halt. A piece of wood, a leather boot, a woven basket, even the soft tissues of a human or animal, can be held in near-perfect stasis for thousands of years. This is preservation with an almost photographic fidelity. Where the desert saves the shape of daily life, the ice saves the substance. It freezes a single moment, a snapshot of a journey, a hunt, or a ceremony, with such clarity that it feels immediate, not ancient. An arrow shaft might still have its fletching feathers attached. A piece of clothing might retain the intricate stitch pattern of its maker. The ice does not just store objects, it stores moments of human experience, sealed away in a transparent vault of cold. Yet this guardian is fundamentally different from the sand or the jungle in one critical and urgent way. Those environments reveal their secrets slowly, over centuries, through natural cycles of wind or the patient work of archaeologists. The ice, however, is now revealing its treasures not through a slow, deliberate unveiling, but through a rapid and uncontrolled retreat. The very climate conditions that created these frozen archives are now changing. As global temperatures rise, glaciers are melting at an unprecedented pace and permafrost is thawing. The vault doors, kept locked for millennia, are swinging open all at once. This means we are recovering these priceless snapshots of the past not through careful excavation, but in a race against time, as the very ice that preserved them drips away forever. The frozen archive is speaking, but its voice is a melting whisper, offering us a breathtaking yet urgent glimpse into a world that is disappearing as quickly as it is being revealed. A glacier is not a frozen river, but a slow-moving mountain of ice, carrying within it the memory of centuries. Its journey begins with the simple, relentless accumulation of snow in high places, year after year, compressing into dense, ancient ice. As this immense mass grows, gravity pulls it downhill in a flow measured in inches per year, a movement so slow it is imperceptible to human eyes but unstoppable over geological time. When such a glacier advances across a high mountain pass, it does not simply cover the landscape, it incorporates it. A stone hunting blind built by prehistoric travelers, a campfire ring, a dropped bronze axe, all are slowly and gently overrun. The ice does not crush these objects, it encases them, lifting and carrying them within its frozen body as it flows. This process, called glacial entrainment, picks up everything from tiny pollen grains to massive boulders, locking them away in a deep freeze that halts all decay. The object becomes a part of the glacier's story, traveling with it for miles or lying in place for millennia, suspended in a clear, cold vault. In contrast, permafrost works through profound stillness. In the polar regions of Siberia, Alaska, and Canada, the ground itself is permanently frozen, sometimes to depths of thousands of feet. Here, settlements were not overrun by moving ice, but built directly upon this frozen foundation. The permafrost acted as a natural refrigerator, its constant cold preserving the organic materials of daily life, from wooden house posts to leather clothing to food stores, in a state of perfect stasis. The settlement and the frozen earth existed in a stable partnership, one that could last forever, so long as the cold remained unbroken. That partnership is now ending. The current dynamic is one of rapid, uncontrolled release. As global temperatures rise, the edges of glaciers are retreating up mountain valleys at an accelerating pace, leaving behind newly exposed ground littered with artifacts that have not seen the sun for 5,000 years. Simultaneously, permafrost is thawing from the surface down. This thaw is not a gentle melting, but a destabilization. As the ice within the ground turns to water, the soil loses its structural integrity, causing the earth to slump and collapse in a process called thermokarst. This can expose entire frozen layers of past ecosystems and human habitation in a matter of months. The guardians of ice and permafrost, once the most reliable preservers, are now becoming the most urgent revealers, offering up their treasures in a sudden, fragile, and fleeting moment before they are lost to the elements or washed away by meltwater. The most powerful testament to the ice's power is not a city, but a single man. In 1991, high in the Ötztal Alps on the border of Austria and Italy, a retreating glacier gave up a secret it had held for over 5,000 years. Two hikers spotted a dark shape in the meltwater, a shape that turned out to be a human figure preserved with astonishing detail. This was Ötzi, the Iceman. He was not a skeleton, but a man frozen in time, with his skin, his clothing, his tools, and even the contents of his last meal intact. The ice had performed a miracle of preservation, offering a snapshot of a Copper Age individual's final hours. We learned he was dressed for the cold in a cloak of woven grass and leggings of goat leather, carried a copper axe, a bow, and a quiver of arrows, and had a last meal of dried ibex meat and grains. We could see the tattoos on his skin, likely for therapeutic purposes, and even determine from his stomach contents the season of his passing. Here, the melting ice did not reveal a grand plaza or a temple wall, it revealed a person. It transformed archaeological study from the analysis of structures to the intimate story of an individual's life, health, and final journey across a high mountain pass. This is the unique gift of the frozen world. It preserves the ephemeral, the organic, the deeply personal items that vanish without a trace in any other environment. This pattern of intimate revelation repeats wherever ancient ice retreats. In the Yukon Territory of Canada, melting permafrost is exposing a frozen landscape from the Pleistocene epoch, a time when mammoths still walked the earth. Here, researchers have recovered perfectly preserved hunting tools carved from antler and bone, left by the first peoples of the region over 10,000 years ago. In the mountains of Norway, receding ice patches have yielded a treasure trove of Viking Age and medieval artifacts, from iron arrowheads and horse tack to woven textiles and leather shoes, items dropped by travelers along high mountain passes and immediately frozen, waiting for our era to be found. Each of these objects is a whisper from a moment that would otherwise be silent. A leather shoe tells us about craftsmanship and climate. A broken arrow shaft speaks of a missed hunt. A horse's bridle reveals trade routes across impossible terrain. These are not the durable stones of palaces meant to last for eternity. They are the fragile, everyday things of life, the very items most likely to be lost to time. The ice does not favor the monumental, it saves the momentary. It captures the evidence of ordinary people going about their lives, hunting, traveling, and surviving in some of the planet's most challenging environments. When these objects melt out, they are not just artifacts, they are messages in a bottle from the deep past, sent to us by the most reliable courier of all, the cold. High in the Swiss Alps, a mountain pass that has been sealed for thousands of years is quietly opening its doors. The Schnidejoch Pass, a corridor through the Bernese Alps at over 9,000 feet, was for centuries just another feature of the ice. But as the local glacier has retreated dramatically over recent decades, it has begun to surrender a stunning collection of artifacts, scattered across the newly exposed rock and earth like clues left behind from a series of separate journeys. These objects form a timeline written in leather, wood, and bronze, not buried in a single event, but lost one by one over millennia as travelers crossed this treacherous high route. We find Neolithic arrows, their wooden shafts and flint points preserved as if dropped yesterday, telling of hunters pursuing ibex over 5,000 years ago. We find a Bronze Age leather legging, a sophisticated piece of clothing that speaks of a prepared traveler braving the cold around 4,000 years ago. There are Roman-era hobnails from boots and fragments from the Middle Ages. Each item is a frozen moment of transit, a personal loss that became a historical gift. The ice here did not preserve a settlement, it preserved a pathway. It acted as a perfect seal on a mountain corridor, collecting whatever fell upon it and locking it away in a deep freeze. This transforms our understanding of these alpine landscapes. We once saw them as formidable, nearly impassable barriers for ancient peoples. The emerging evidence from passes like the Schnidejoch paints a different picture, one of routine, seasonal travel. These high routes were not for the faint of heart, but they were functional highways used for moving between valleys, for trade, for summer grazing, and for hunting parties. The ice was a silent custodian of this traffic, capturing the material proof of journeys that written history never recorded. Now, as the seal is broken by warming temperatures, each melt season becomes an archaeological event. Researchers monitor these retreating ice edges closely, knowing that the objects revealed are incredibly fragile. A piece of leather that survived intact for 4 millennia can begin to decompose in days once exposed to sun, rain, and modern bacteria. The recovery is a race against time, a careful gathering of stories from the meltwater. This pass, and others like it across the alpine chain, are reopening a window we never knew existed, showing us that the mountains have always been a place of movement and connection, their history written not in stone but in ice, and now finally being read. The frozen ground of the Arctic holds entire worlds in its grip. Across the vast, treeless plains of Siberia and the northern coasts of Alaska, a layer of earth has remained frozen solid for tens of thousands of years, a condition known as permafrost. This is not a passive layer of dirt, it is a deep freezer for history, and the communities that thrived here built their lives in direct partnership with its preserving chill. The Yupik and Inuit peoples, along with ancient Siberian cultures, constructed semi-subterranean homes using the most abundant materials available: whale bone, driftwood, and sod, often building directly upon the frozen substrate. The permafrost acted as a permanent foundation of cold, preventing their wooden supports from rotting and their leather-bound tools from decaying. For centuries, when these settlements were eventually abandoned, the permafrost simply continued its work, swallowing the sites into a stable, frozen silence. The houses, their contents, and the organic debris of daily life were locked in a state of perfect stasis, sealed away from the corrosive effects of oxygen and time. This has created some of the most extraordinarily complete archaeological sites on the planet, where we find not just post holes and hearthstones, but the woven grass baskets left in a corner, the remnants of a sealskin parka, and even strands of human hair, offering a tangible, intimate connection to individuals who lived and laughed in these spaces millennia ago. Yet this incredible preservation is now facing its greatest threat, the very thaw that is revealing it. As Arctic temperatures rise at more than twice the global average, the permafrost is warming and melting from the surface down. This thaw is not a gentle process, it is a destructive unraveling. The ice that binds the soil together turns to water, causing the ground to slump and collapse in great, oozing scars called thermokarst. This sudden exposure is a violent shock to artifacts that have known only constant cold for thousands of years. A wooden mask, once frozen solid, is now vulnerable to fungi and bacteria that attack it within weeks. Delicate leather, preserved with all its stitching intact, can curl and disintegrate in a single season of sunlight and rain. This creates a heartbreaking paradox, a race against time where the very mechanism of climate change that uncovers these treasures is also the force that will destroy them forever. Archaeologists are now engaged in a desperate rescue mission, monitoring satellite imagery for new thaw slumps and rushing to sites that are literally melting out of the ground. Every artifact recovered, from a child's toy to a hunter's toolkit, is a piece of a cultural puzzle snatched from the brink of oblivion. The permafrost is speaking, telling profound stories of human resilience and adaptation, but its voice is fading even as we learn to listen, reminding us that some of history's greatest discoveries are also its most urgent goodbyes. The thread connecting desert sand, jungle vine, and glacial ice is not simply time but climate. In every story of a city's disappearance and its startling return, the environment is the lead character, and its script is written in cycles of change. The initial abandonment, the moment human hands let go, was so often triggered by a shift in this delicate balance. For the Garamontes in the Sahara, it was the slow death of their fossil water sources, a creeping aridity that turned their green valleys back to dust. For the Maya, it was a series of punishing droughts that emptied reservoirs and shattered faith in the rulers who promised rain. In the high mountains, a period of cooler, wetter weather allowed glaciers to advance, swallowing passes and the travelers upon them. These were not random disasters, but responses to broader planetary rhythms, historical climate shifts that redrew the maps of where life could thrive. The environment became an agent of concealment, using its new regime, whether advancing sand, consuming forest, or encroaching ice, to gently wrap these places in a protective shroud. This long sleep, lasting centuries or millennia, was a direct result of that initial climatic push. Now, in our own era, the script has flipped. The same force, climate change, is once again the catalyst, but this time for revelation instead of retreat. Our current period of anthropogenic warming is pulling back those natural shrouds at a breathtaking pace. Glaciers are melting not in a slow geological cycle, but in a rapid, human-accelerated retreat, yielding their frozen archives. In the Arctic, thawing permafrost is collapsing to expose villages preserved for 1,000 winters. Even the deserts are responding, as changing wind patterns and more intense, sporadic storms scour ancient sites clean. We are living through a great unveiling, a moment where the planet is handing back chapters of its history that were sealed away by the last major climate shift. The profound irony is inescapable. The very human activity that now threatens our global climate is also unintentionally solving ancient mysteries. It allows us to see the full circle, to witness how past civilizations adapted to change or ultimately succumbed to it, and in doing so, holds up a mirror to our own moment. The buried cities are reappearing not as isolated curiosities, but as urgent messages about resilience, fragility, and the enduring conversation between humanity and a dynamic, living Earth. This great unveiling is guided by a new kind of vision. For centuries, discovery relied on luck, local knowledge, and the backbreaking work of clearing vegetation or moving sand. Today, a technological revolution has transformed archaeology from a careful dig into a precise scan. We are no longer just looking at the ground, we are learning to see through it. The new explorers are not only people with shovels, but satellites in orbit, drones in the sky, and radar pulses sent deep into the Earth. These tools allow us to map entire lost landscapes with breathtaking clarity, revealing the ghostly outlines of civilizations without ever disturbing a single stone. It is a shift from excavation to revelation, where the first step is not to dig, but to listen. The most transformative of these eyes in the sky is LiDAR, which stands for light detection and ranging. Imagine flying a specially equipped plane over a dense rainforest like the one around Angkor. A laser scanner mounted underneath fires millions of invisible light pulses toward the ground. Most hit the leaves and branches of the canopy, but a lucky few slip through tiny gaps and continue down to strike the solid earth or the stone ruins hidden beneath. By measuring the precise time it takes for each pulse to bounce back, a computer can digitally strip away every single tree and vine, creating a pristine, three-dimensional map of the bare ground surface. What appears is nothing short of magical. Suddenly, the scattered temples are connected by a vast, intricate web of raised roads, canals, house mounds, and community ponds, the complete urban skeleton of a metropolis that has been invisible for 500 years. LiDAR does not find a single building, it rediscovers an entire civilization's blueprint, revealing the true scale of human ambition beneath the green shroud. From the humid jungle, this same principle of seeing through barriers applies to the open desert. Here, the challenge is not foliage but sheer, overwhelming scale. Searching for a mud brick wall or an ancient irrigation channel across hundreds of square miles of sand is like looking for a single specific grain on a beach. Satellite imagery provides the first crucial filter. Modern satellites can detect subtle differences in soil moisture, vegetation health, and even the mineral composition of the surface. A buried stone wall will affect how plants grow above it, often creating a faint, straight line of slightly different greenery. An ancient riverbed, long dry and filled with sand, might retain a tiny amount of moisture that shows up as a dark streak on a thermal image. These are the whispers from the past, visible only from orbit. When a promising anomaly is spotted, ground-penetrating radar takes over. This device is pushed along the surface like a lawnmower, sending radio waves into the ground. When those waves hit a buried wall, a floor, or even an empty tomb chamber, they bounce back with a distinct signature. The result is a sonogram of the desert, a subsurface map that shows the layout of rooms, streets, and fortifications still sleeping safely beneath the dunes. It allows archaeologists to plan excavations with surgical precision, knowing exactly where to dig to answer a specific question, rather than digging blindly in hope. This technology has mapped the subterranean waterways of the Garamontes, tracing their fagaras for miles under the Sahara, and has located undiscovered tombs in Egypt's Valley of the Kings, proving that even the most studied sands still have secrets to share. In the frozen realms, technology serves a more urgent rescue mission. Drones equipped with high-resolution cameras and thermal sensors fly over retreating glaciers and thawing permafrost, creating detailed maps of the newly exposed terrain. These aerial surveys can identify artifacts as small as an arrowhead on a vast field of glacial rubble, something nearly impossible for a ground team to spot. More importantly, they monitor the rate of change, showing scientists exactly where the ice is melting fastest and where the next treasures or tragedies are likely to emerge. For artifacts that have already melted out, three-dimensional laser scanning creates perfect digital replicas within minutes. A Viking Age wooden ski, beginning to warp and crack in the sun, can be captured in every detail, its exact shape and tool marks preserved forever in a digital archive before the original succumbs to decay. This is critical because in the race against thaw, preservation often means preservation by record. The physical object may be too fragile to save, but its story can be digitized and shared. These tools turn a desperate scramble into a systematic recovery, ensuring that the fleeting messages from the melting ice are not just found, but are truly heard and saved for future generations. This technological leap has democratized discovery, making it possible to systematically survey vast, inaccessible regions and ask new, bigger questions. We are no longer just finding lost cities, we are understanding lost worlds, seeing how they connected, how they managed water, and how they ultimately related to their environment. The sand, the jungle, and the ice have kept their secrets for millennia, but now we finally have the keys to the vault. LiDAR has not merely improved jungle archaeology, it has fundamentally rewritten the rules of seeing. From the air, the forest canopy is an unbroken sea of green, a perfect camouflage. But beneath that leafy roof, the laser pulses perform their quiet magic. Each aircraft-mounted scanner sends down hundreds of thousands of light signals every second. The vast majority reflect off the tops of trees, but a persistent fraction finds its way through tiny gaps in the foliage, all the way down to the solid earth. By measuring the minuscule time difference between the return of a pulse that hit a leaf and one that hit the ground, sophisticated software can digitally delete every single tree, vine, and bush. What remains is a breathtakingly precise three-dimensional model of the bare earth, a landscape stripped naked of its living cloak. On this new map, the past emerges with startling clarity. What looked from the ground like a random, forested hill is revealed to be a perfectly symmetrical pyramid. A gentle slope becomes a grand ceremonial staircase. The seemingly chaotic jungle floor resolves into a meticulous grid of vanished streets, the ghostly rectangles of thousands of house platforms, and the intricate lines of agricultural terraces and water management canals. For the first time, we are not guessing at the size of a lost city, we are measuring its streets. We are not imagining its population, we are counting its homes. This is not discovery, it is revelation on a continental scale. In the dense rainforests of the Amazon basin, long thought to be a pristine wilderness dotted with small, scattered tribes, LiDAR is unveiling a completely different story. Flying over regions in Bolivia and Brazil, lasers have mapped vast, complex settlements connected by straight, raised causeways that run for dozens of miles. They have revealed enormous geometric earthworks, circles and squares carved into the forest floor on a scale only visible from the sky, suggesting sophisticated social organization and landscape engineering that flourished for centuries before European contact. This evidence is transforming our understanding of the Amazon from a virgin forest to a carefully managed garden, a built environment where human societies shaped the ecosystem on a monumental scale. Similarly, in the jungles of Central America, beyond the famous Maya sites, LiDAR surveys are uncovering sprawling networks of smaller cities and towns, all interconnected by wide, paved roads. It shows that what we once called isolated city-states were in fact nodes in a vast, integrated civilization. We can now see how these societies managed their world, channeling water with precision, fortifying hillsides, and organizing farmland with an efficiency that supported populations far larger than anyone previously believed possible. The laser light is illuminating a hidden chapter of human achievement, proving that the greatest cities are not always those built of stone, but sometimes those woven so perfectly into the living world that they became invisible, waiting for a new kind of light to bring their story back to the surface. The desert holds its secrets beneath a surface of uniform gold, but from orbit we can see its hidden handwriting. This is the power of multispectral satellite imagery, a technology that allows us to perceive what the human eye cannot. These satellites do not just take pictures, they capture light across many different wavelengths, from visible colors to the infrared spectrum. This reveals a hidden landscape of contrast. For instance, the soil directly above a buried mud brick wall retains moisture differently than the loose sand around it. This minute difference affects how sparse desert plants grow, often creating a faint, straight line of slightly healthier vegetation tracing the ghost of a wall beneath. Similarly, the ghost of an ancient river called a Paleoclimate may be completely filled with sand, but its different soil composition can reflect heat in a unique way, showing up as a dark, winding scar on a thermal image. From hundreds of miles in space, the satellite sees not a featureless plain, but a palimpsest, a surface where the erased writing of ancient geography is still faintly visible to the right kind of light. This celestial cartography has rewritten the map of human connection across the most formidable deserts on Earth. In the Taklamakan Desert of western China, the shifting sands erased the legendary Silk Road from the land, leaving only stories. For centuries, historians knew the general paths from texts, but the precise locations of vital oasis towns, the lifelines for caravans, were lost. Satellite imagery changed that. By scanning for the subtle signs of subsurface structures and lost waterways, researchers have pinpointed the locations of numerous lost settlements. They can trace the faint lines of ancient caravan trails connecting them, routes chosen for access to the now vanished rivers that once made life possible in that barren sea of sand. We are not just finding cities, we are mapping an entire economic and cultural network, understanding how people navigated an impossible landscape by reading the environmental clues they left behind, now visible only from the heavens. The same story unfolds across the Sahara. The empire of the Garamantes was once thought to be a minor footnote, but satellite views revealed its staggering scale. The imagery clearly shows the dark, dotted lines of their underground fagaras, the irrigation tunnels that tapped fossil water, stretching for hundreds of miles like a vast, subterranean nervous system. By following these lines, archaeologists have located unknown farming communities and fortresses, painting a picture of a sophisticated hydraulic society that mastered the desert for over a millennium. This technology allows us to see the desert not as an empty barrier, but as a lived-in space, crisscrossed with the logic of survival and trade. Each discovered Paleoclimate is a recovered chapter in the story of climate change, showing where water once flowed and why civilizations rose in specific spots. Each faint line of vegetation reveals a wall, a courtyard, a memory in the sand. The satellites provide the broad strokes of the map, and then archaeologists on the ground can follow those strokes to the very doorsteps of history, listening as the desert finally shares the full story of its forgotten inhabitants. These cities were not victims of random misfortune. Their very brilliance, the ingenious systems that allowed them to flourish, often contained a hidden fragility. To understand why they were positioned to be buried, we must look at the patterns of human ambition, at the calculated risks that ancient societies took to build their wonders. The most consistent thread is a deep and sometimes precarious dependence on a single, life-giving resource. In the heart of a desert, that resource is water. Civilizations like the Garamontes did not just find water, they performed hydrological miracles to access it, digging those deep fagaras to tap fossil aquifers. Their entire society, its agriculture, its population, its power, was built on that one non-renewable source. It was a triumph of engineering, but also a gamble. When the climate shifted ever so slightly, when the aquifer levels began a slow, irreversible decline, the foundation of their empire literally dried up. Their success was measured in centuries of green valleys, but their vulnerability was baked into the very infrastructure that made it possible. They mastered the desert, but only for as long as the ancient water held out. Once it was gone, the desert they had held at bay was no longer a managed landscape, but an active agent of burial ready to reclaim its own. The city's location, chosen for its access to that secret water, became its trap. A similar, though opposite, dynamic played out in the rainforest. Here, the challenge was not a lack of water, but an overwhelming abundance of life. The Maya, for instance, built their soaring cities on a foundation of thin, tropical soil. Their agricultural success relied on intricate practices like terracing and raised fields to manage nutrients and drainage. Their dense urban populations were sustained by a careful, constant balancing act with the jungle. This created a different kind of vulnerability, one of intense concentration. A vast number of people depended on a managed ecosystem that required continuous, coordinated labor to maintain. When a series of droughts stressed this system, the social and political structures designed to coordinate that labor came under immense strain. The very density that made their cities centers of culture and power also made them profoundly sensitive to disruption. A failure of the political or spiritual leadership, often linked to their perceived role in ensuring rain, could trigger a loss of faith and a breakdown in the communal effort needed to fight back the forest. Their location, chosen for symbolic, political, or agricultural reasons, placed them in an environment that required perpetual vigilance. The moment that vigilance wavered, the jungle, which they had skillfully held in check, ceased to be a resource and became an overwhelming force of reclamation. Their success was in creating order from chaos, but their vulnerability lay in how much energy that order demanded every single day. Then there are the high, cold places. Settling on the frontiers of glaciers or on permafrost was not an act of hubris, but one of profound adaptation. The peoples of the Arctic and the Alpine passes understood their environment intimately. They built with its materials and designed their lives around its rhythms. Their vulnerability stemmed not from a misunderstanding of the cold, but from its absolute constancy. Their technologies, from semi-subterranean homes to tailored clothing, were perfected for a specific, stable range of conditions. They bet everything on the cold remaining. When that bet held, as it did for millennia, their settlements were preserved in remarkable detail. But this deep specialization created a latent fragility. A significant warming trend, something beyond the scope of normal climatic variation they were accustomed to, would not just be an inconvenience, it would unravel the very fabric of their preservation. The permafrost that anchored their homes would soften, the game animals they relied on might shift their migration patterns, and the glacial passes that were frozen highways could become treacherous rivers of melt. Their success was a masterpiece of specialization, but it was a specialization that left little room for error when the planet's larger climate rhythms entered a new phase. The settlements were positioned in zones of great bounty when conditions were right, but also on the front lines of planetary change. This pattern repeats across deserts, jungles, and ice, a story of civilizations reaching for the limits of what their environment could offer, building marvels on the edge of sustainability. Their greatest achievements often placed them directly in the path of the natural forces that would one day, gently or suddenly, wrap them in a protective shroud. What does this tell us about our own cities, built on coastlines, in fire-prone regions, or on drained aquifers? The conversation between ambition and environment continues, and the past suggests that listening to that dialogue is not just about history, but about foresight. That moment of silence when the last resident departs is the most crucial pause in the entire story. For the sand to settle, for the vines to take hold, for the ice to advance, the constant hum of human maintenance must first cease. Abandonment is not an event, it is a process, a slow unraveling of the ties that bind a community to its home. Across every environment, the reasons echo a similar theme of profound environmental stress. In the desert and the jungle, the most relentless foe was often a prolonged and punishing drought. For societies whose entire existence was calibrated to precise rainfall patterns, a shift lasting decades was not merely a hardship, it was an existential crisis. Reservoirs built by the Maya or the Garamontes would gradually empty, their stone-lined basins baking in the sun. Crops would fail season after season, straining food stores and social order. The very authority of rulers, often intertwined with their perceived ability to ensure rain, would evaporate alongside the water. This environmental pressure did not instantly destroy the city, but it steadily made the monumental effort of living there, of fighting back the sand or the jungle every single day, seem less and less worthwhile. People did not vanish, they made difficult, pragmatic choices. Families and clans likely dispersed gradually, moving toward more reliable water sources, to smaller, sustainable settlements where the balance between effort and survival was clearer. Over a generation or two, the population dwindled until the last caretaker, perhaps the guardian of a minor shrine or the keeper of an ancestral home, finally closed the door and walked away. That final footstep leaving the central plaza was the starting gun for nature's reclamation. In the high altitudes, the trigger was different but equally decisive. For settlements on the edge of ice, a period of rapid climatic cooling could have made passes permanently treacherous or buried hunting grounds under deeper, longer-lasting snow. For others, the exhaustion of a key local resource, like a particular herd of migratory animals or a stand of crucial timber, might have made the location untenable. The cold itself was not the enemy. It was the change in the cold, the shift from a predictable, manageable freeze to an unpredictable, hostile deep freeze that altered the landscape of survival. In each case, the decision to leave was a response to a broken contract with the environment. The terms that had made the location prosperous, whether it was hidden water, fertile soil, or a reliable cold, were rewritten by a changing climate. This critical pause in human activity, this collective decision to seek a new equilibrium elsewhere, created the necessary vacuum. It allowed the natural processes we have followed, the drifting sand, the advancing forest, the creeping ice, to begin their patient, centuries-long work of gentle concealment, wrapping the empty streets and silent homes in a protective shroud until the world was ready to listen to their story again. Each environment acts as both a perfect guardian and a relentless eraser. This duality is the core tension in every discovery, a race between what was saved and what is slipping away. Take the desert's dry embrace. Its profound aridity is a miracle for organic material. Leather, textiles, wood, even food can survive for millennia in that still, dry air, giving us intimate snapshots of daily life. But the same wind that gently buried a city is a master of abrasion. Once a wall or a carved inscription is exposed, that wind drives a blizzard of sand grains, acting like nature's sandpaper. Over years, it can scour delicate reliefs from stone facades, rounding sharp corners and slowly erasing the very details that tell the story. The desert preserves the ephemeral but attacks the permanent, forcing a choice between uncovering a site and leaving it protected beneath the dune. The jungle presents an opposite paradox. Its consuming humidity and teeming microorganisms make short work of wood, cloth, and other organic traces of life. A wooden house post vanishes into soft earth within a generation, yet the stone foundations of that same house, the grand pyramids and temple platforms, often endure. The jungle camouflages them with soil and roots, but the stone itself, while stained and pitted by acidic rain, can remain structurally intact for centuries. The roots that pry apart masonry also hold it in place, preventing collapse. So the jungle saves the monumental skeleton while devouring the flesh and blood of the civilization, the everyday items that made it human. We see the grand plan of the city but lose the texture of the lives lived within it. Then there is the ice, the most faithful and yet most fickle keeper. Its deep freeze is unparalleled, preserving everything from a hunter's last meal to the color in a woven tunic with photographic clarity. Nothing else offers such a complete, frozen moment. But the moment that ice melts, the preservation spell is violently broken. The context, the careful arrangement of objects that tells the story of what happened, is often the first casualty. A collection of artifacts from a campsite, once held in precise relation to one another, tumbles down a moraine in a slurry of meltwater and rocks, scattering the story across a mountainside. Organic materials that survived for 5,000 years in the cold can decompose in a matter of weeks under the sun. The ice gives a perfect snapshot, but upon thawing, it drops that photograph into a puddle, causing the ink to run before we can fully read it. This delicate balance creates an urgent, global conservation crisis. Archaeologists are no longer just discoverers, they are first responders. In the Arctic, teams must reach thawing permafrost sites within a single season, sometimes within weeks of a slump appearing, to digitally scan and recover artifacts before they rot. In the jungle, the act of clearing vegetation to study a site can expose it to rapid new decay from sun and rain. And in the deserts, tourism and even well-meaning excavation can accelerate wind erosion. The great unveiling driven by climate change is a double-edged gift, offering unprecedented knowledge while threatening to erase that knowledge almost as quickly as it appears. The race is not just to find these places, but to listen and record their stories at the very moment the Earth decides to share them, knowing that this window of revelation may itself be fleeting. The pace of this great unveiling will only accelerate in the decades ahead, reshaping the map of human history before our eyes. Each guardian, sand, jungle, and ice has its own timeline for surrender, offering a forecast for where the next wonders will emerge. In the immediate future, the melting cryosphere, the world of ice, will remain the most urgent and active frontier. As warming trends continue, glaciers from the Alps to the Andes to the Rockies will retreat further, exposing mountain passes that have been sealed since the Bronze Age. Each summer's melt will be an archaeological event, yielding perfectly preserved artifacts that tell intimate stories of travel, trade, and survival. The thawing permafrost across the Arctic will collapse in more places, revealing not just isolated objects, but entire frozen landscapes and the settlements built upon them. This frontier, however, is a race against decay, where every discovery is also a rescue mission to document treasures that begin to vanish the moment they are exposed to sun and air. Simultaneously, the green vault of the rainforest will keep giving up its secrets, but through deliberate technological sight rather than environmental crisis. The widespread adoption of LiDAR scanning is still in its early chapters. As surveys expand across the Amazon basin, Central Africa, and Southeast Asia, we can expect a continuous stream of revelations. Each flight over a previously impenetrable canopy has the potential to map a lost urban network, rewriting our understanding of population density and societal complexity in the tropics. This technology allows us to discover without disturbance, to see the grand plans of civilizations that left behind earthen mounds rather than stone towers, revealing that some of humanity's greatest experiments in living together are still hidden in plain sight, waiting for the laser's light. Yet for sheer scale of potential, the silent deserts may hold the ultimate prize. Vast tracts of the Sahara, the Gobi, and the Arabian Peninsula remain virtually unexplored beneath their shifting sands. These regions likely guard the greatest number of undiscovered sites, from small way stations to entire trading cities, preserved in the dry dark. Their revelation often depends on a fleeting alignment, the right storm to scour a surface clean, or the systematic technological sweep of a satellite or ground-penetrating radar survey. A single change in dune migration can unveil a wall that has not been seen for 3,000 years. The deserts remind us that patience is a form of preservation, and that the next great city to emerge may not be found by a team with shovels, but by an algorithm scanning orbital images for the faintest ghost of a footprint in the sand. This future of discovery is not a passive waiting game. It is an active conversation with a changing planet. We are learning to listen to the signals, whether they come from a melting trickle of ice water, a digital pulse of laser light, or a satellite's eye noting a suspicious straight line in an ocean of dunes. The Earth has been the keeper of these stories all along, and now, in this unique moment, it is beginning to speak. The desert, the jungle, and the ice are telling us the same profound story. These three guardians, so different in their methods, reveal a unified truth about our relationship with the planet. Human civilization does not exist in a vacuum. It is a constant and delicate negotiation with the forces of the Earth itself. We build where resources promise prosperity, often on the very edge of sustainability, mastering a specific set of environmental rules for a glorious, fleeting moment. Then, when those rules change, whether through a slow climatic shift or a sudden resource depletion, the environment responds. It does not attack so much as it reclaims. The sand drifts in, the vines climb, the ice advances, performing a slow, planetary act of preservation by concealment. The city is not destroyed, it is put to sleep, wrapped in a protective shroud woven from the very element that once sustained it. This is why these places keep reappearing. Our planet is not a static museum where history sits neatly on shelves. It is an active, living participant in the human story, a collaborator in both the rise and the gentle burial of our greatest endeavors. The forces that hid these cities are the same forces now revealing them. Only this time, the script is being rewritten by our own hands. Modern technology gives us the eyes to see through sand and canopy, while contemporary climate change accelerates the thaw of ice and the scouring of deserts. We are living in a unique moment of planetary confession, where the Earth is sharing secrets it has held for millennia. Each lost city that emerges is more than a collection of stones and artifacts. It is a lesson in both fragility and resilience. It shows us the breathtaking heights our ancestors could reach, and the sobering speed with which environmental pressures can unravel even the most sophisticated societies. Yet it also shows their profound adaptability, their capacity to disperse, to move on, and to begin anew elsewhere. These sites are not tombstones, they are chapters in a much longer story of human ingenuity. Their reappearance is an invitation to listen, to learn from the dialogue between ambition and environment that has shaped our entire history. That dialogue continues today in the coastal cities, the agricultural heartlands, and the water-stressed regions of our modern world. The past, now rising from the sands and melting from the ice, offers us a priceless perspective. If you find this conversation between humanity and the planet as compelling as we do, consider diving deeper. Seek out documentaries that explore these rediscovered worlds, or learn about the organizations working to digitally preserve fragile sites before they are lost again. By supporting these efforts, you become part of the next chapter in this great story, ensuring that the whispers from the past are not only heard but remembered.